Bob Rapoza, and I'm the author of the Nick Randall series, currently 4 books, and a 5th book coming out later this year.
Hi, I'm Cole Chase. I'm the author of the Shadowfast Action Thriller series, 6 books, including Play Dumb, which came out in February.
And I'm Pat Wheel, author of the Park and Walker Action Thriller trilogy, and this is my favorite, number 3.
And we are here today to look into what we can learn from reading The Gray Man. Gray Man's a tremendously popular series by Mark Greaney, now up to 14 titles. So we picked the 8th book to just plunge right into the heart of the series and see what we can make of it. So we're going to talk about Mission Critical. Bob, I wonder if you can kind of give us a quick summary to help orient people to what this book is about.
Sure, Cole. Our hero, Court Gentry, finds himself in the middle of a CIA prisoner transfer that goes really south very quickly, and he turns out to be the only person who can follow the bad guys, and he discovers there's a plot taking place that involves a former Russian general for the SVU who's plotting on doing some sort of mayhem to the Five Eyes conference taking place in Scotland. And it takes Court from various parts of Europe all the way to Scotland with the help of his friend Zach Hightower and Zoya, who is the daughter of the Russian general who's got this plan going on. And I'll drop it there so that we don't give away any of the highlights.
You mentioned some of the globe-trotting aspect of this. We are in the U.S. a little bit. We're in England a lot. We're in Scotland. We have characters from North Korea, Russia. Turns out Greaney actually has a degree in international relations. So it seemed like a very well-researched book. So I guess I'm pitching to you guys, did you find the research and the details of all these different things made the book more convincing and interesting to you?
Oh, yeah. One of the best things about Greaney's work, this is the 2nd book I've read. I read number 2, and now this is number 8. And both times, he really does his research. In fact, if you go on his website, you can see all these pictures of everything he does. You know, he goes scuba diving. He goes into the shooting range. He participates in these battles. So it's not just shooting targets. Like he really takes it seriously. Combat medicine. He's got certified in combat medicine, and he knows all the lingo and the job descriptions of the CIA. Everything is just super well researched.
This is part of what I like, is this blend of a lot of the things in the book that happen are kind of improbable. You sort of want them to be because that's the over-the-top thrill of a thriller. But because he has all this background, he knows which weapon they would use. He knows what the protocol would be for clearing a house or whatever. You feel like, yeah, that could happen. It helps you suspend your disbelief.
His description of the weapons and ops, and even the way that the operators communicate with each other, including some really dark humor, just really, I kind of think, makes it a much more believable and enjoyable story.
I'm glad you brought up the humor, because a lot of it, I found that to be a strength of the book. A lot of it is in the dialogue. So it's not, you don't get this sense of the author trying to be a smart aleck or laboring to be funny. He's just giving the kind of gallows humor that I think frontline operatives really do have. One of the ones I enjoyed a lot was they had captured one of their enemies. He's with 2 of his colleagues, and one of them says, "So are we going to do good cop, bad cop?" And he says, "No, we're going to do bad cop, worst cop, psycho cop." There were things like that where they kind of subvert your expectation, and it's very amusing.
And then there was one of the characters, Hightower, is like the best buddy of Court, who's the main hero. And that their banter together is really cool. I get the feeling that Mark Greaney is kind of like a good friend. Like he knows how to be a buddy with someone, you know, like a brother, because the banter between those guys was realistic and it was funny, and I liked it. And what was Hightower, he has a code name, and it's kind of a Fifi code name. It's called Romantic. But Hightower, he wants to be called Night Train. So he calls up his handler and he says, "Okay, can I be Night Train instead of Romantic?" And the handler says, "No, forget about it." And it's kind of a running joke throughout the book.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
keeps trying it out and trying to like convince people to start calling him that, and they keep insisting, no, these are assigned randomly, and you have to keep it. And of course, Court's code name is Violator.
Yeah.
There's that point later in the book, later in the story, towards the end, where they're entering into a dark space, and Hightower has another line of, where basically he's telling, someone asks him, "Who's there?" And it's like, "Who's there? It's America, motherfucker!" And then he just, unloads a bunch of, and sorry for the blue language there, but and unloads about several rounds from a shotgun into the darkened room. And it's like, like Pat was saying, then Court looks at him and goes like, "You've been waiting your whole life to use that line."
Yeah.
It's great. You can see the two of them. Like, I almost wonder if there's another person that Greaney knows, like you're talking about, that they talk that way to each other. And it's fantastic.
We've alluded a lot to Zach Hightower, who is another operative who has in the past worked with Court Gentry. Their paths have separated for a long time, and then they are brought together by their handler in this book. Talk about some other characters that stood out to you.
The one that I really like, she's a minor character, but she was a really smart scientist working for the bad guys, and her name is Janice Wan. She's from North Korea, and she's quirky, and she doesn't like to be touched, but she's really smart, and the backstory was well done. I like that part.
And then the main baddie, of course, General Zakharova. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if not, I'm sure I'll find out I didn't. And basically his motivation is he blames the West for killing his whole family. And as we come to find out, that's not exactly true, but they create an incredible backstory. There's an interesting condition that both he and his daughter Zoya, another main character in the book, possess that was really well written. And I don't want to give it away because it plays a critical role. But the way Mark Greaney decided he was going to give these two people, who are obviously related to each other, this same kind of genetic condition that is used several times throughout the book, just brilliant. I think it's a great example of writing to a level of detail that really makes the story believable.
I like the fact that everybody in the book, the good guys, the bad guys, they're well motivated. Especially relative to how this genre can go, where people are just running around and killing folks and there's not a clear reason why, or there's an action scene but you don't know what the stakes are. That doesn't happen here. It's all very clear. And we're kind of circling around the elephant in the room. Zoya Zakharova, this general's daughter, has been a Russian operative. As the book begins, she's in a U.S. CIA safe house because she is trying to defect, basically. And over the course of many of the Gray Man books, she materializes as a love interest for Court. Well, talk about an inconvenient girlfriend or boyfriend, because they both have to go on these death-defying missions all over the globe. They don't hardly get any time together. When they are together, they're wounded. So it's an interesting thing that Greaney is doing that strikes me as pretty original in this genre as a whole.
I like it. Right now in my books, I'm writing some romance, and it was nice for me to see that Greaney is doing that too. I thought it was a believable relationship. I liked both characters. So yeah.
They're both badasses, Zoya and Court. Zoya on her own may arguably in some situations be even more deadly than Court because she's smaller, she's female, and so sometimes there's not that expectation from the bigger beefheads out there, and she just takes them down with ease. I love it.
Well, and instead of the trope of, oh, here's the female and our great hero has to keep saving her, she saves Court a couple times. She's definitely his equal.
Yeah.
Early in the book, or certainly in the first third, Court encounters this gigantic Russian dude who basically just beats the stuffing out of him. When we edit this, I'll insert a passage just showing how damaged Court is after he loses a fight to this guy.
Court sat in the darkened den, holding a cold bottle of beer to his face. His lips were swollen, blood still drained from his nostrils, his left eye was puffed closed, and his jaw, chin, and left cheekbone were gray from bruising. His abdomen and ribs were splotched with purple and gray bruising.
Zoya has to patch him together and save him, but then Court winds up going through most of the book kind of crippled. In the second encounter, he loses again and falls out a window and breaks his non-shooting hand. So he's really damaged through the whole book. I just wondered what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, no, I think it was too much.
When I was reading it, and, hey, I know Court Gentry's in a lot better shape and younger than I am, but I was imagining he took a beating in that first one. Okay, I can still see him after that, but then he took the second beating and jumped out of the window. I kind of thought personally like he'd be a little too messed up to really perform some of the tactics that he performed later in the book. That's my opinion. But, again, he does his homework, he does his research, so, it's kind of hard to argue with Greaney's success here. And so I'm going to kind of leave it at that. But I did feel like maybe Court was a little beat up excessively.
Yeah, there's passages where he can't even pull his own T-shirt off over his head because his arms won't raise. He wants to plunge himself into a tub of ice in order to lessen the swelling, and he can't get in without assistance from Zoya. So then to have him in the finale of the book charging around and blasting people and doing all the stuff you want an operator to do, that bumped me a little bit. I do want to say, though, I prefer this over the invulnerable character who no one's bullet can hit, and no matter, they fall out of an airplane and they're fine. So I guess you have to just decide which side of the line you might err upon. Is he invulnerable? Is he too vulnerable? Greaney made a colorful choice.
Yeah.
Sometimes heroes are written in such a way you're going like, well, I kind of sound like Superman there, and to see someone take damage like that and lose and maybe make a mistake here or there, that really, again, adds to the believability of the character.
Yeah, and the rooting power, too. Again, you've got this guy who could be almost super in how fast he is and his knowledge of weaponry and his brilliant ability to improvise. Then to find a way to actually make him the underdog, that's pretty good concept for Greaney.
Yeah.
So this book weighs in at 140,000 words. Do you guys have opinions either about the prose style itself, the length of the book, anything you want to weigh in on?
My problem was that it was too long. And it wasn't just that it was too long, because, you could read this book that grips you for 160,000 words and it wouldn't feel long. The problem was that it felt long. Like, I try to make in my thrillers, like, twists and turns and surprising things. And it maybe, like you said, Bob, in a conversation that we had, maybe it's a genre thing. Because what Greaney does really well is the action, with the guns and tactics and the movements and stuff. But I wasn't surprised or shocked and any of things like that. And that was my problem. So it felt long. And by 62%, I was like, oh, man, nothing's happened yet. It was surprising.
I really enjoyed the book, and I'm going to go back and read more of his work because this is the genre that I'm kind of writing to. Were there times where I thought maybe a chapter here or there might have been able to be cut? Sure. I think but again, I think a lot of that is artistic license too, and the expectation of readers. And clearly by Greaney's success, he's hit upon a formula that appears to be working for him. So, in the market, I think you got to know your audience. I think you got to write to your audience. And I think some of those matters could be left open for debate, right? Would this book have been even more successful if it had been a couple chapters shorter? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe some people would have missed that material. It's tough to say. Based on writers' rules, could we say like, yeah, this was a long book? Definitely. I think so. But it works.
Yeah.
One of the things we look for as writers is a phrase we call telling, not showing. So I commended the book on all the characters. They have strong backstories that give them good motivation for what they're doing. But I don't know if all that backstory had to be spelled out for every single person and was often told almost in the style of a news report instead of like maybe a flashback where we see, like you said, General Zakharova is motivated because he feels that the West killed most of his family. Maybe we could have done a flashback and see some of that happen instead of just having it told to us with names and dates and recited like a history book. And I realize the irony of a person without even the tenth of the sales of Greaney criticizing it, but we read these things to form opinions and see what we can learn. And there were places where I wanted him to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, no disrespect. I know that Mr. Greaney is working very hard, and his goal is to support himself and his family, and I have that same goal. So respect.
Well, and yeah, and he clearly is trying to get better with every book, and none of them have the feel of, oh, he phoned this one in. I mean, I've read all 14 because I like it that much. So
I think everything you're saying is accurate, and he's extremely successful. The book I found very entertaining. I think a lot of it has to do with what we feel as readers and what our audiences want. But I do feel that there were times where I was like, okay, I got this part, we can move through it. At the same time, I think there's a lot of big time authors out there that we could call the same situations on who are extremely successful. And so it's fascinating because when we are trained as authors, we're told show, don't tell, right? We're told if it's not moving the story along, you should cut it. And there are definitely parts in this book where he felt like, yeah, we could cut that and it still would have flowed. It may have even flowed better. And yet this resonated with the readers. So it's a very interesting. I think we could do an entire show about that whole aspect of writing.
well, maybe we'll end on this note. What do we think then are the strengths of the series, or I'll put it this way, why is Gray Man so popular in your opinion?
I think the characters are very well written. I think his research is amazing. I think his understanding of tactics, the CIA organizational structure, the organization and interaction between the different intelligence agencies within the Five Eyes. This guy knows what he's doing. And what Pat said, and Pat, you're absolutely right, and I love this, going to his website and seeing all the things that he's done. I mean, look, if you're going to get yourself into the water so that you understand what scuba diving is about, and you're going to go to the shooting range and you're going to take classes on tactics and get military military medicine training, certified. I mean, you're trying, right? You're putting in the effort. No one's ever going to be able to accuse you of not looking into this at a granular level so that you understand these things. And I think that kind of makes a big difference. I was shocked. I didn't know about you guys. When I went back and looked into his background, I expected to see some sort of paramilitary background. And this is not the case. And it's like, how did this guy get access to all these things? And I'm super impressed with Greaney as a person and his dedication to his craft.
I'll go with that. As we look across the action thriller genre, it often divides in two, where you have people whose background is writing, and that's why they're writing novels, but they don't know as much about whatever police procedure or close quarter battle or even how you strategize with the military force you have. So some of that may not be realistic, or they don't know what they don't know. Then on the other half of the line, you have people whose whole background is law enforcement or military or paramilitary, and they often struggle with the mechanics of writing. What impresses me about Greaney is that he is the bridge. He can write. He's thinking solidly about characters and motivation. His concepts for plots are original. But because of all this research he's done, he sort of bridges the gap between the writer and the military guy. And maybe that's why he's on top of the heap.
These are guidebooks. I think we could agree that what guys want when they come from working all day and they're tired, it's just something cool to look at, and reading about weapons and fighting and getting the girl and stuff. I mean, that's fun. So that's another reason, I think.
It's such a good observation, right? We're guys. There's something about guys where it's like, I had a bad day. I want to go beat on something. I want to go build something. I want to go tear something apart. Or I want to read about somebody doing it who's more capable than me, because if I try to do that, it's not going to end well.
Oh, or even it doesn't even have to go violent. If you're just trying to start a business or you're trying to get a promotion at work, a lot of times you're in there slogging for years at a time with no apparent payoff. And in most of our cases, at some point, it finally does pay off. But that's part of why I enjoy video games and why I enjoy action thrillers, because people who have agency and they move ahead for sure. They accomplish the goal. They're doing things that take way longer in real life than they do in a novel.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on The Gray Man, what you see as the strengths of the series, weaknesses if you perceive any. 14 Gray Man books. You can tell us which one's your favorite. What did you think of the movie? I hated it. So there's plenty of room for more discussion about The Gray Man, so let us know in the comments. Thanks for hanging out with 3 thriller authors as we investigate The Gray Man.